Welcome back. In this video, we're going to look at the first agricultural period, which is Prepottery Neolithic A, from 11,700 to 10,500 years before the present. And obviously, they didn't have pottery at that time, thus the name. So the struggling Natufian, let's call them settlements, flourished when the climate warmed again. So here's the Younger Dryas Ice Age. And then 11,700 years ago, the climate started warming, and the people that had been just starting agriculture, now rainfall was supplying the water for their crops. And so it was a time of expansion and agricultural innovation. And we'll be focusing on three locations. One is some springs that formed at the base of the Judean hills on the west side of the Jordan Valley. And so these are Jericho and Netiv Hagdud and Gilgal. Then we'll also be looking at a community that was at the southeast end of the Dead Sea called Zahrat ad-Dra. And we'll also be looking at Wadi Fanan, which was a perennial stream. And so we had two communities or locations supplied by springs and one supplied by a perennial stream. Obviously, if you were an agricultural community, you would need water year round. So here's Wadi Fanan, and this is a current view of it. It's obviously not a perennial stream anymore, but in the period from the Prepottery Neolithic A period and Prepottery Neolithic B, and this was the Prepottery Neolithic A location. This is the Prepottery Neolithic B location. Notice they weren't right down by the stream because these are like huge washes or streams, sort of like Tucson. And every once in a while during a huge rainstorm, they would swell. And also, I just want to say that behind you, this location, this goes up to a sort of plateau that's in Jordan. And so you have these wadis cutting across this plateau intermittently as you travel south through Jordan. And so this is down in the Jordan Valley down here where these communities were. And so this water was coming from those upper plateau areas which received more rain. And this is just a archaeological excavation of what they call WF16 or Wadi Fanan 16. And you can see that they had circular stone and mortar houses that were partly subterranean. And this is just a reconstruction, a painting of what they think it might have looked like 10,000 years ago. So it was a perennial stream. Okay, let's move on to Zahrat ad-Dra. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. But they've looked at the people that lived there and examined their bodies, and they can see where there was like arthritis and other problems just by looking at the bones. So they noticed that with farming, there were injuries to shoulders and other body parts that were used in cultivation. There were no art objects. So the Natufians prior, I showed you an art object in the last slideshow. There were no art objects because they were so busy farming. And also because Zad was in an arid region, there was not much game. So they invented the bow and arrow, which enabled them to be much better at catching game. Also, they had brick and mortar round houses, such as the other communities in the pre-pottery Neolithic A period, with thatched roofs. So they had walls made out of brick and mortar and then a roof made out of thatch. And so they burned the roofs each year to get rid of the bugs and then replaced the roof. Also, one interesting thing that they did is they buried their dead under the houses. And the Natufians had already been doing that under their little huts during the hunter-gatherer period. But the new innovation was they, after the bodies had decayed for a while, they excavated the dried skulls and then displayed them in their houses. And the first evidence of domestication of wheat is at Zad. And but there's also evidence that they were domesticating wheat or barley at other locations in the Fertile Crescent. For example, over in Iran at approximately the same time, there was domestication of wheat going on. And there was also a domestication of wheat in the Taurus Mountains. And so what they're able to do is they're able to use carbon dating to precisely date when wheat is domesticated. And the way they see if it's being domesticated is they look at the head, and they notice that the seeds might be getting bigger and the stalk might be more stable, so it doesn't break when you harvest it, but then it needs to break when it's being threshed. The stalk is called the rachis. And so they very carefully look at when communities started adopting breeding practices that were improving their grains. Okay, and then the last place we're looking at is Jericho, and that's located on the west side of the Jordan Valley. This is the Dead Sea down here. I actually stayed over here one time in Jordan at the Movenpick Hotel, and I could look over here. But anyway, Jericho had 70 round mud brick houses, similar to the other ones, and they also mined flint to make sickle blades and knives. And interestingly enough, there was a wall at Jericho. So we've all heard of the Wall of Jericho. This is not the Wall of Jericho in the Bible, but the wall, this initial PPNA wall, it was quite amazing. It was up to 2 meters thick and 5 meters high with a total circumference of 600 meters going around the whole community. And there was also an 8-meter wide and 3-meter deep ditch around the wall. And these are the type of picks and axes that they think they use to dig and make the wall. They also think they might have used fire and water to break down the rocks or ground. But what that tells us is that there was a high degree of social organization. So this was probably the beginning of politics, these communities, because you would need to organize a lot of people to make such a large wall. Also, it's probable that they irrigated crops with their spring water. The spring is called Aina Sultan, or actually also Elisha's spring. And they also, in this region, and this might be just in Zad, but they made food storage huts with suspended floors which had air circulation and plaster. The PPNA culture vanished at Jericho 10,200 years before the present. And so they don't know exactly why they vanished. It could have been war, it could have been famine or disease, they're not sure. And one other thing I wanted to mention is that towards the end of the PPNA, animal domestication was beginning. And so there were many animals that were domesticated in the Prepottery Neolithic A in the Fertile Crescent. Now dogs were pets and also used for hunting. And although dogs were probably domesticated first in Europe, 11,000 years ago, a lady was buried with her dog in Zad. And also they began domesticating goats, sheep, pigs, and cattle. So we'll look at that in the next video. See you next time.